So let's kind of go through this, right? What do I mean by this? So if you see a client hit the table, right? We're not going to say the client was mad because how do you know if he's mad, right? What we will say is the client hit the table with an open hand 3 times. We can see that. We can see how many times somebody hits a table, and we can see it with our own eyes, right? We cannot see mad. And now you might be going, okay, but I've seen people angry before. I know when somebody's upset. If you pause and break that down, what you're really saying is I know when someone maybe screams, maybe uses curse words or not appropriate language, when they ball their fists or they hit a wall, those are observable. You can't see their thoughts, right? And so, for instance, a lot of times we're working with clients who might be nonverbal. Maybe they can't vocally communicate their thoughts and feelings. And it might be real tempting if we see a client crying to go, oh, they're sad. But how do you know this? How do you know that they're sad? Because they're crying? Well, maybe they're crying because they're frustrated. Maybe they're crying because they're angry. Maybe because they're crying because they're laughing too much. Maybe they're crying because they're scared. Maybe they're crying because they're nervous. Maybe they're crying because they're really hungry or they're in pain and they can't communicate to that. And their frustrations bringing about tears. We don't know. All we know for sure is that they are crying. And so we never want to kind of put our own assumptions, our own judgments onto that child. So the way we avoid that is by just stating what we see. He is crying. Why is he crying? I don't know. I can say this happened before, right? I can say he asked for food. I told him no. He started to cry. I know all that. I can't say if he's frustrated. I can't say if he's angry. I can't say he's sad. That I don't know. Let's go through a few more of these because this is really important. And when we're really looking at functional assessments and your job as the RBT within that, the main thing is this data collection and making sure you have all the things and tools that you need. So let's take a look at a school setting, right? If a student yells during math class, we don't really want to write student hates math. We don't know that. We don't know how he feels about math. Instead, we're going to write student yelled for 10 seconds after math worksheet was placed on desk, right? We can observe all that. And again, we're drawing a causal link. First, then. First, the math worksheet was placed on the desk. Then the student yelled for 10 seconds. Maybe we're in a home setting, right? If a child throws a toy after being told to stop watching TV, you're going to write child threw toy across the room for 2 seconds after TV was turned off. We're drawing the link, that first, then. A clinic setting. During play, if the client grabs a toy from another child, right? Client grabbed toy from peer after peer took turn with the block. You're describing the facts. You're describing what you can see and observe, never your feelings on the situations, right? We're really concerned about what we can demonstrate and what we can prove. And the best way to do that is just being as factual and, honestly, as to the point as we can, right? What you observe is what you write. So next, let's get a little bit more detail about the role and the descriptive assessments. And so descriptive assessments means we're observing what naturally happens, right, without changing anything. And so this kind of comes in a couple different formats, and this is going to build off what we talked about previously, but this is going to be things like taking ABC data, collecting baseline measures, looking for patterns, staying objective, and following your supervisor's instructions. And so let's kind of go over a little bit of like what some of this stuff is. So for example, ABC data. This is your antecedent, your behavior, your consequence. And so that antecedent is what happened before. The behavior is whatever the child or the client or whoever we're working with is doing. And the consequence is what happens after, right? And so ABC, antecedent, what happened before, behavior, what the person engaged in, consequence, what happened after. So let's give an example. So a teacher gives a math assignment. That's the antecedent, right? What happened before? Teacher gave the math assignment. Behavior. What did the client do? The client leaves the seat. What was the consequence? What happened after? The teacher reminds the student to sit back down, right? And so you kind of see we have this again, this causal link of this first then, right? First, the teacher gives the math assignment, then the client leaves the seat, then the teacher reminds the student to sit back down. It's all kind of linked together by the relationship of time. They're all kind of occurring in sequence there. And so, kind of continuing on with this, you might start noticing patterns, right? You notice the student leaves their seat more during group work. And this helps your supervisor understand potential triggers, right? And just reiterating the lessons we talked about before, this is why it's important to write down what we see and observe. If you write down that the student hates math homework, well, that's one thing. But that may or may not be true. But if we start noticing that, hey, he's leaving every time it's group activities, well, it might not be about math at all. Maybe he has issues working with peers. And this is more of a social skill deficit, not an academic one. And so now this changes our entire treatment plan because now we're not trying to work with academic stuff. Now we're working with social skills. Write what you see.